Good afternoon. I'm going to start with a poem that was read to some of the guys' information gathering in Seattle by our Jesuit provincial. It's called The Song on the Feast of the Epiphany. Be bold like the Magi. Do not tarry, settling into your comfort, but rather set out keeping the star in your vision. It will lead you to the place you are most in need of, the place where God is. And if an angel warns you in a dream not to return by the old way, please listen. UCSD Newman, it is so cool to be here with you guys today. Thank you. It's such a privilege to come back to a place that meant a lot to me. This community does mean a lot to me. I spent 4 years here as a student, graduating in 2013. And this place in particular, the Newman Center, it was a place that I called home. It was a place where I was comfortable to share my faith, my hopes, my dreams, and that's a very vulnerable thing, but also to share some of my struggles and my challenges. And the other day, I walked around UC San Diego, and I revisited familiar places, walked old paths, and the last 2 days, I've been here directing the student ministry retreat, and they're an awesome group. You guys are in wonderful, wonderful hands. And as I was doing that, as I was revisiting these familiar places, one thing struck my prayer very clearly. I have grown. And the last 5 years, there's been ups and there's been downs. There's been joys and a lot of challenges. All is grace, but without a doubt, my prayer said to me, I have grown. And 5 years ago, when I left UCSD, I was entering the Jesuits, and I knew that I was going to grow a lot, but I also thought I had myself well figured out, too. I was an SM for 3 years. It's a long time. I applied to the Society of Jesus for months, and that included a 20-page spiritual autobiography, 4 interviewers with one-on-one questions and going into depth, a psychology exam, lots and lots of questions, and lots of hours and hours of praying, self-reflecting, and discerning what is God's call for me. It was stressful. And through those hours and hours of prayer and of questioning who am I and what am I called to, I felt like the Magi. I felt like I finally saw the star. And I felt called to join the Jesuits and to make my life one of gratitude, one of sharing God's love with God's people. And so I ask us each today, what is our star? What is the star that guides us? I think for all of us, this is a very important question because we need that star. We need that light to guide us. We need the foundation upon which we build our spiritual houses. And as my novice master would say almost every single day, keep your eyes on Jesus. No matter what you're doing, no matter where you go, keep your eye on Jesus. But just as the God of surprises is never done surprising us, I think I get in trouble when I confuse having this star, having this thing that I'm following, with having it figured all out. And I think we as people get in trouble when we think that we have no more room to grow. So we want to grow, whether we've been here for a day, for 5 years, for 50 years. We want to grow more fully human. We want to grow closer to God. And so the question becomes, how does that happen? I think in order to grow, we must be like the Magi, following the star. But more importantly, we must be bold like the Magi. Bold enough that if warned in a dream to not return by the old way, we listen. St. Paul in the second reading talks about mystery made known to him through revelation. And when we hear revelation, I think of, the Epiphany, that light bulb moment where, aha, we get it. And if that happens for you, awesome. Go with it, trust the Spirit. But today, I invite you to consider that God's invitation to revelation, God's invitation to growth, can happen in very subtle ways and often in the ways we least expect it. In the Jesuit world, there's a phrase. Are you ready for it? Agere contra. Say it with me. Agere contra. Agere contra is a Latin phrase which means to act against. And the idea of agere contra is that we as people, I know myself definitely, we often attach ourselves to familiar patterns of behavior and become unwilling to leave our comfort zone. And St. Ignatius believed that the dark spirit works through these insecurities, that the dark spirit tempts us by saying, don't do that, it's unsafe, or don't do that, it's unfamiliar. That these voices prevent us from acting in freedom and living a life of truth the way God intends. So this phrase, agere contra, helps us recognize when these insecurities are coming forth and ask us to live in greater freedom. So in the novitiate, which is the first 2 years of Jesuit training, there's a joke around agere contra. It basically means that your first assignment or your house job will be something you hate. So if you were the guy who always left the bathroom really dirty, your job was going to become to clean the bathrooms every single day. Or if you're a guy from Southern California who has no idea what the cold is like, your first mission will be to Alaska. And the spirit of agere contra, isn't to deny our true selves. It's not to do something that we don't want to do just for the sake of doing that. The spirit of agere contra is one inviting us to a greater freedom and a greater fullness in God. It's a spirit that invites us to resist the evil spirit which hearkens, stay put. So I will share one story. When I was a kid, I hated going to Mass. Hard to believe, but I basically went to Mass maybe twice or 3 times a month when my mom had enough energy to drag me. And my dad's not Catholic, so I would ask, if he doesn't have to go, why do I have to go? But basically, I thought it was boring, and I had other interests in mind to do during that hour. And when I was a senior in high school at St. Ignatius in San Francisco, I needed one more religion class to fulfill my requirement. And I had this developing interest in human health, eventually coming here and doing pre-medical studies. And so the religion class I chose was human sexuality, because I thought, here's a very practical, applicable religion course to life. Because of the way my class schedule worked out, I didn't get that class. Instead, I got liturgy class. And when I saw that, I was pretty upset, and I talked to a lot of people to see if I can do any other class besides that one. Long story short, I didn't think that was the right class for my growth. Longer story even shorter, I loved that class. The teacher was on fire about explaining the liturgy and making the messages applicable to my life. She loved talking about how the music just brought it all together. My classmates were fun, and I enjoyed being part of this group that organized all the weekly school liturgies. And even at the end of it, I enjoyed attending the liturgies. And I share this story because it's an example of how I grew because I was asked to leave my comfort zone. I grew because I was asked to do something I didn't want to do initially. And the last 5 years since graduating from here and entering the Jesuits, I have grown more human, and I've grown spiritually, I believe, because I have been asked constantly to go to unfamiliar places and be with unfamiliar people. What are the safe zones that we cling to because of our insecurities? Where is God calling each of us to grow? The spirit of adjura contra, going against what is safe or comfortable in order to grow, in order to pursue greater freedom, doesn't always have to mean big changes, life changes, or physically moving changes, but perhaps it could also mean looking at the old in a new way. Perhaps the spirit of adjura contra asks us in this new year to look at ourselves the way God does, with love, with mercy, with compassion, rather than our normal self-judgment. Perhaps the Spirit invites us in our service and our ministry to others to recognize that those we serve are not the other. They're not people we help, but our brothers and sisters, broken and wounded just like us. For students, perhaps the spirit of adjura contra asks us to change how we struggle with that question. And believe me, I know this question very well. What is God's plan for me? And instead of thinking about A and B and trying to figure out which is the right one, otherwise God will get mad, maybe instead we should consider a God who is too busy loving us to have a plan for us. Perhaps for us older residents, the Spirit asks us to look at our relationships or our partners for 30, 40, 50 years and to see someone through which God is not yet done manifesting his love. My friends, we are the Magi, keeping our eyes up, following the star towards Jesus. But let us also be bold like the Magi, listening to the Spirit which asks us not to return to old ways, to act against the things that restrain our growth and guides us to a life of freedom and fullness with God. Amen.